Okay, so it is time for us to get started on this 466 hybrid build. I've already got the saw torn down. So this was a FARMERTEC G466, so a 460 clone. I went with the blue one because I like the blue. I think the blue looks the best of all the options. I definitely wasn't going to actually put one of these all together myself. Personally, I think that the ones that already come together are the ones that have the best parts in them. I mean, I may be wrong, but I bought one kit, an 880 kit that I was going to put together myself, and there were several little things wrong with it that weren't wrong with my 440 saw that I had at that time. So that's just my thoughts on that. It could be wrong, but so let's get into this build. So what this is, FARMERTEC 460. This is a 660 big bore cylinder, 56 millimeter. And inside here is a 661 56 millimeter piston. So if I can get all of this to work, which everything I've seen so far seems to be good. I clearanced the case a little bit. That's why I got my little Dremel here. I've rigged up something to make it a little easier so I can kind of scoot it out of the way. Actually just use that clothesline to scoot my Dremel out of the way when I'm working here. I'll move my little stand. I made this little stand so it's easy to run this foot pedal. As you can see, have my heel up higher. I feel like being able to push down for me was easier than lift your heel way up, because this foot pedal is kind of tall, so your heels or your toes are way up. So side note about that. But back to this. So 661 piston, 660 big bore cylinder. The bolt pattern is exactly the same. I've already shown in a previous video that the intake, I'm going to get the intake to be able to work. I'm going to use the 660 intake boot, which will bolt right up to the 460 carburetor. All that seems to be fine. Similar in length, similar in height, which is also the important piece. So everything I could see before buying this chainsaw seemed like it was going to work. So before I do this, let me show you some of I'm kind of just go by what I can show you at each step here. So we can see the motor completely rolls over. This is where it sits at bottom dead center. I guess I'll make a little mark there with my Sharpie. For reference. So that's it at bottom dead center there. This is the muffler, and I'm just going to kind of just place this on here just to kind of show you that the muffler, or I guess the cylinder here, is a little bit offset. So here's the cylinder that came on it, and you can see, just kind of I don't know, maybe it's not easy to see, but this one's actually shifted over a little bit. Relative to these bolt holes, you can see that this is shifted over. They're roughly the same height, and they're about the same distance this way from the bolt holes. It's a little bit different angle here on the flange here on this one, but it is relatively close. So I may have to, I think what I'm going to do here, so it's relatively close, and I think it's going to be even closer once I drop the cylinder the amount that I need to. We'll cross that bridge when we get there, but if it's a little bit too far off to just widen and just make this work, then I'll probably just add a little plate to the back here, run little spacers behind here so that it sits a little bit higher. I mean, it doesn't hurt anything to have it sit out a little bit. That's actually what my 440 hybrid has. There's two little 1/4-inch nuts that I drilled out to space this muffler out a little bit. So that's kind of what I was thinking to do for that. But you can see that it sits up there relatively flat. It's just a slightly different angle, not much. But these bolt holes actually line up. You can see that they actually line up. It's just not in the correct position on the saw or on the case itself. So that's the muffler. I think that should be relatively easy to get to work. The next thing, while the cylinder's still on, is you can see the intake here. The intake floor is not flat, but I know I'm going to have to epoxy that up anyways. I've already taken the numbers, so I can take this wheel off. Get that out of the way. So the motor didn't quite fully roll over in complete stock configuration with the 661 piston, but I clearanced the case just a little bit because so I could make sure that I'm going to be able to make this work. Everything so far seems to be possible. The other thing I was going to show you here was this cover. So this cover is definitely not going to fit on here right now. There's going to need to be some trimming done. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the machine work, do the port work, then run it without this cover on first, just to prove that it's worth my time to actually do all the sanding here to get the top cover to fit on. You can't cut any wood with it, or I wouldn't be trying to cut any firewood with this thing without this top cover on, but we definitely can cut a couple cookies just to see if it's even worth trying to do that. Because if it's not worth trying to do that, then I'm not going to continue. If it's not going to run good enough to justify that, then I don't see a reason to do all that work there to get this cover to fit on nice if it doesn't run good. So top cover, definitely going to need some trimming. I'll kind of put these cylinders next to each other just to kind of show you, illustrate that a little bit better when I pull the cylinder off. So let's pull the cylinder off. And they're a little tight. There was Loctite on these cylinder bolts. The only Loctite that it seemed that they used from the pieces that I took apart to, you know, do a tear down was the cylinder bolts and the ones that hold this coil on. Those are the only ones that actually had Loctite on them. Everything else was loose. You know, even the bolts that hold the muffler to the cylinder here, those were loose, which was not good in my opinion, but everything was real loose. I probably could have just impacted everything off, but I like to use my little hand tool there to just loosen everything up before running the impact on it. Don't know, it's gonna be tough. So real quick here are these two cylinders. You can see that the height is relatively close here, and then I'm gonna try to like line them up just by eye. You can see that the one is just a slightly different angle. I don't see that as a big deal. If it's slightly off, I think that metal will just bend a little bit to fill that gap. For that slight little bit's not going to matter. But you can see how much taller that this 660 big bore cylinder is relative to this one. It's a good little bit taller. And you can see these fins here stick out a little bit more on right around here. So I'll trim whatever's necessary to get the saw to be back together, but I don't think I'm going to trim all of them to put this cover on. I may, just depends on how much work that I think that it's going to be. Real first thing is do all the port work here now that I know that I think that this is possible based off of the other little steps that I'm going to, or little pieces that I'm going to show you. So pull this piston off. Ooh, not good. All my lines have went away. That's not good. So what I did, it's not the end of the world here, but you can kind of see a faint outline of my exhaust port trace on here. I can't go too wide on the exhaust because I got to keep in mind this pin. I don't want to be too close to that, but I could probably widen the exhaust a little bit because it was like about like this. Yeah, I washed this case out, so I guess somehow some carb cleaner wiped all this off this piston. That's no good. But I'm just going to draw this one little line here for a reference. Okay, so here's my reference line. This is when the piston's dropped all the way down, touching the squish band. So when I'm not going to cut the squish band on this saw at all. I'm going to leave it as is. It appears to be pretty flat. The combustion chamber seems to be pretty small. So, and I've heard that these 660 big bore cylinders really make a lot of compression. They're difficult to pull over. That's what I've heard from other people who've built them. That's what they've said. A lot of compression, pretty difficult to pull over, and we don't have as, I guess, as good of a recoil ratio here as the 660. I believe that flywheel here is a little bit bigger. You get a little more leverage on it. But what I do have preset here is the amount of material that I need to take off to get it relatively close to, you know, the right squish. This is actually the measurement right at, you know, drop the piston all the way touching the crown, so it's going to be about 20 thousandths less. So 110 thousandths minus 20 thousandths, so roughly around 90 thousandths is what I'm going to have to take off the cylinder base to get the right squish, which is plenty possible because you can see how thick this one is, and you know, this is the one that came on it, so you can see that's definitely going to be possible. So we're going to take about roughly 90 thousandths off the base. I'm going to clean that little nick up right there. Take roughly 90 thousandths off the base, and I guess I do need to put this back in there just to show you, so I'll just take a second. We'll mark all the lines. Make sure I'm putting it on the right way. We don't need to tighten both of them down. I'm just going to screw like one down. And it's just being a little tough to put in. It's easy before. I guess I just had it in there like perfect before. They literally strap right in. Oh. I guess I was just off just a teeny bit. So it's back on real quick, so I can mark these lines so you can see what I'm talking about. One of these tools here is essential for working on chainsaws. It's also nice to have the impact version of it as well. That makes the teardowns quick and the reassembly quick. I would definitely do the hand tighten with this guy, but saves you from spinning it as much. So let me grab my little Sharpie right here. Just a fine point Sharpie is what I'm using for this kind of stuff. So we're going to go all the way to what I feel is bottom dead center, right about there. I'm going to trace the top of the intake here. I can't really. I need my Pica marker to actually do a full port trace. That works better for that. And I'll run this up to kind of show you how I got that one measurement. So it looks like about, not 100% exact, but it'll get you to see what I'm trying to show you. Hopefully that doesn't wipe off. Yeah, it seems to be okay. I think it was because I had the carburetor cleaner in there. All right. Chainsaw vise, pretty important tool to have if you're working on saws. It makes it so much easier to do this. And I knew I was gonna be working on a couple saws. I figured I'd get this one. A little bit of Loctite still on these bolts, but I'm sure all that will come off with the number of times I'm gonna have to take this cylinder on and off. Good. Put that down. Need the Sharpie to pop the pin out. Okay, so luckily we can see it. So this mark here is roughly the amount from when you drop the piston and touch the combustion chamber when it's upside down. That's the bottom line. And this upper line is how far the piston goes up at top dead center. So I would need to take roughly this much off, minus 20 thousandths or whatever I want to set the squish at. Probably a little bit more than 20, maybe 22. So that's this amount, which, yeah, 111. Bring it back out to 0. It's close enough. Just for reference. So one thing I was concerned about, because initially I couldn't, the piston wouldn't make a full rotation, so I had to come in here and clearance the case a little bit. It's not super pretty, but it's better to do a little bit more than a little bit less. So I had to clearance a little bit on this side, and then I just did a little extra up here in the front. The way that I did that was I used some of this machinist layout fluid, and then I just used this flywheel when the cylinder was on and rotated the motor around on both sides to kind of use the bottom of the piston to kind of make a little line on the cylinder, I guess the case base here, so I knew how much to grind to get this piston to work in there. It didn't need much because let me put it on the right side. Oh, that one's got the pin on it. Still ones come with the one pin installed. So this is how far, like this was the piston at bottom dead center on the exhaust side. This is how far it comes below the cylinder base. But if you notice here, I don't know what's the exact right angle, I hardly needed to clearance really anything, because this piston's actually a little bit taller, or I guess the skirts on it's a little bit shorter. The piston's quite a bit taller. That helps with the stroke difference. So back to this one, what I was concerned about was I didn't know how much it needed to roll over completely, you know, before I ground the case a little bit. So this is just kind of rough, but it seems that this is going to be possible. I may be able to run the lower ring because the ring pin, the ring locating pin is over here on the exhaust side on the 661. So I don't see any issue with that, but if you know that you can't do that, then maybe leave me a comment. But I don't see how that would be an issue. I think I've seen, like, I think the 880 also has the same kind of staggered pin thing, and the lower pin actually, or lower ring actually came below the intake roof, intake hole roof a little bit. But since the pin is over here, you could do that. You just can't have the ring. You couldn't have the, you know, intake port come all the way open up to here, and then you would hang a ring. So everything so far seems to be possible. The numbers, that's another important piece. Now these are not 100% accurate numbers, but they're close. Close is the relative baseline, maybe within 1 or 2 degrees of, you know, a true number. So we've got intake is 85 degrees, the exhaust is 109, and the transfers are 135. Now that's with no machining, no nothing. I did have to clearance the case a little bit, but not much. And then I'm going to remove about 90 thousandths from the cylinder base. Then I'll, in the next video, I'll make an updated stock timing number video, and then kind of show where I'm going to go. I can tell you the numbers that I'm going to go with. As long as I can achieve these numbers, I'm going to go pretty high on the exhaust roof, probably like 96. 118 on the transfers, maybe a little bit more. I'd like a shorter blowdown, because this is more of a toy saw, I guess. It's not like a dedicated firewood saw. I'm going to build it to try to be as reliable as possible, but I really want a lot of RPM. It should have more torque with this bigger piston in it, bigger piston and cylinder. So I'm not too concerned about the torque. I really don't cut that much really big wood, so I don't really care that much about the torque. I really just want the chain speed and the RPM. That's what I'm after. Intake 78, and I said the transfers like 118, maybe even a little bit, open them a little bit sooner. I'm not 100% sure yet on that. No fingers, because this cylinder is probably pretty thin since it's 56 millimeter. Definitely gonna have to rework. There's one bolt still in here. Yeah, for whatever reason, it's kind of tough. Tough to get that one out. Get out of there. But anyways, the lower transfers are going to need some work, so I can utilize these windows in this piston. The 661 actually doesn't even use these windows, but I guess they did that to make the piston lighter, because it's a front fed transfers on that one. But I believe, from everything I see, I think that I can make this project work, and it'll be interesting to see what it's going to do here. I mean, it seems so far to be pretty easy, or a pretty easy hybrid so far. I mean, we're real early on here, but everything so far is bolting right up. It's going to need some clearancing, stuff like that. I'm definitely going to have to trim these fins if I want to put that top cover on. But the next step, I'm going to do the machine work. Probably do the porting as well, but I'll record the next round of timing numbers just to do it, to share. And I don't think I'm going to be able to drop the cylinder enough, maybe, to drop the cylinder enough to be the right intake duration. Not really concerned about that, because I can just throw a little JB weld in there if it's not quite enough. I'm really shooting for that 78 on the intake, but I might reach it by taking 90 thousandths off the base. I guess maybe I will reach it. Not 100% sure on that, but that's like the least of my concerns, is because you can always throw some JB weld in the intake or drop the intake floor, so that's no concern to me. Also, I noticed that I drew, so the piston's going to stick up a little bit farther than this when I take that 90 thousandths off, but that's okay, because my 881, it sticks up about this far, and that thing runs plenty good. We're definitely going to raise the exhaust roof a good bit. I guess pretty much as I can go. I'm probably going to have to do like an exhaust roof that's kind of sloped more down, like a Husqvarna 372, so I get that right opening height and not grind through the roof here. That definitely would be not good. Pretty much going to leave the outside width alone. I don't see any reason to change that. That's plenty big, I think. But yeah, so that's kind of a little introduction video to this 440 or 460 hybrid build. I mean, I don't think anyone else has done one of these before, but I kind of knew, just based because I had a 660 big bore cylinder, I had a 460 cylinder, then I got the intake boots for both, and was kind of trying to figure out if I could actually make this work. You know, I've been thinking about this for a while, and now I'm finally at the stage where I can do this build. So as I've said before in my other videos, this is not a tutorial. This is me just showing a project that I'm working on. I mean, I'm not an expert at doing this kind of stuff. I can do some things and get some chainsaws to run pretty good, but by no means am I an expert. I've only ported 5 of my own chainsaws, you know, just out of my own personal interest. It takes a lot of time to do this, but it is a fun little hobby to have. I think it's really rewarding when you can take a chainsaw that's slow and then make it cut really fast. And yeah, that's the fun part about it. And especially like these hybrid builds where you're doing some engineering, you're trying to see, you know, what the limits you can really push, you know, some of this stuff to. Hopefully this connecting rod is strong enough. I think that it'll be fine. It probably won't live a long life, to be honest, but I would think that this saw should cut pretty fast. My goal is for it to be able to beat the 500i, which I think it should, but I don't know yet. This is an experimental build. I haven't done any chainsaw build that's this wild before. I've done the 440 hybrid, the 880 build with the 3120 piston in it, and the 500i build with the Y-scope piston. But other than that, I mean, all the porting that I've done is really just, you know, standard little machine work, raise transfers, you know, change the port shapes, but that's been pretty much it. So this is the first, I guess, bigger project that I've had so far. So yeah, I'm excited to see where it goes. That's it for this one. Thanks for watching.